Welcome to the Inside Track, a groundbreaking webinar series hosted by Corrine Schneider, founding partner of Compass Equity Strategic Advisors. Join us as we delve into the journeys of exceptional founders and CEOs who are shaping the future of their industries. From sharing their professional stories to uncovering invaluable lessons learned, each episode promises to inspire and empower. We are so happy you've joined the conversation.
Well, welcome everybody to the Inside Track. So glad you could join us today. Today is going to be like a fine box of chocolates. I get to spend the hour with Tom Kobe talking about topics near and dear to my heart, but I think to many people. I think you called it, Tom, the better together way of doing business. And I think it's really not just a trend. I think it's really where every business that we're talking to these days is really going. So let me welcome everybody. I'm Corrine Schneider. I'm a founding partner of Compass Equity Strategic Advisors, and we help companies grow. That's what we're all about. And our Inside Track webinar series is to bring in some of the special guests that we meet along our journey that we think would be helpful for our clients and prospects and friends and colleagues to learn from as well. So pleased to have Tom Kobe with us today. And Tom is the CEO of Ping Pilot and a co-founder of a company called Quote. And we're going to talk a little bit more about what they do in a moment. But Tom, maybe can you give everybody a little bit of background on yourself?
Yeah. Hi, Corrine. Thanks for having me on. Serial entrepreneur, which means a lot of things, wear a lot of hats. Some days you're the janitor, some days you're prioritizing dumpster fires, and some days you feel like an actual CEO. And so I spend my time right now really at the intersection of marketing, product, and sales. And what's got me really fired up right now is partner go-to-market and all the just innovation that's happening around the partner GTM space.
So before we talk a little bit about your personal journey, let's talk a little bit about Partech, which was a new term I learned from you, versus Martech. Why is partner selling so important? Why did we get to this point? I mean, I think we've always talked about it in the 30 years I've been around, but why now is this becoming important to companies?
So yeah, why now is a good question. I think the kind of overlay there is that partner GTM has always been one of the most effective, but also one of the most difficult from like an organizational perspective, right? Getting your business to play well with others as well as we play well with, the folks inside, your own company. But I would say the why now, particularly in Silicon Valley and tech and SaaS, is outbound is still working, but not. It's a shell of what it once was. Inbound is give or take 3 to 5 times more expensive than it was pre and during COVID. So CAC is way up, and the churn is higher on those customers. So when you look at the shift from growth at all costs to efficient growth, and what the market is wanting right now, it's the most efficient growth engine. But it's also one of the hardest organizationally, and to make that pivot to be better together with your partners and emphasize the relationship and those go-to-market motions with those partners just as much as you emphasize your own outbound or inbound efforts.
So just for those who don't know, CAC, customer acquisition cost. We work with a lot of companies who are raising money, and for many investors, this is one of the most important numbers that they want to understand is what are you spending to bring in a customer? Churn, obviously, is how long are you keeping those customers and how many of them are coming through the front door and walking right out the back door, because then you're basically just burning money if you're spending all this money and they're not staying. So 2 very important numbers to focus on if you're an entrepreneur. So talk to me a little bit more about this partnership, because I think when people think partners, a lot of times they think, well, I'll go find someone out there and we both do different things and we'll just work together and we'll try to, help each other out. I don't think that's the way you see partner relationships. Talk to me about what an ideal partner relationship looks like.
No, yeah, it is not all that different from our personal relationships, and in that an authentic relationship requires ongoing conversation and tending to that relationship. And I feel like a lot of commercial partnerships, commercial relationships, even for some of the biggest companies out there, companies like Apple, I've heard stories about how they've tried to go and run partner programs, and it's often very one-sided. It is often not reciprocal, and a good, healthy relationship is interdependent, not codependent. And so it's that interdependence, and creating that joint go-to-market, that joint value creation story that reciprocates on both sides. And that's where MarTech has fallen short in this, ParTech landscape now. MarTech started out, it was the MarTech 500, then it was the 1,000. Now I think it's like the MarTech 14 or 15,000 different vendors in the marketing technology space. But when you look at them and kind of their architecture and how they work, they're single tenant architectures, meaning they're meant to only serve you as the primary business. And ParTech is meant to treat everyone equally, and everyone's data kind of has the same rights. And kind of take that a step further, what we're seeing a real opportunity is what we're calling multi-tenant architectures, or multi-tenant co-selling, multi-tenant co-servicing, where, let's say we put a joint campaign out together and we both put MDF or market development funds together, which many companies have to go do these programs. And we put together a video and an ebook and ads. And then we have our CTAs further down the funnel. Well, when you start to get further down the funnel and you go from, consideration to now some real intent to purchase, and folks start raising their hand and they respond to one of our calls to action. In the past, traditionally, one partner has run point, and then the data will flow through to the other partner, which I don't believe is fair or equitable for a modern partner GTM motion. The best partners I see share that data. And so when that text message comes in or that phone call comes in, both partners have the ability to have their normal back channel conversation through Teams or Slack or whatever they're using, but then they can both see the response to that text message or the conversation that happened. So when you think about like deal orchestration and orchestrating the deal between those two companies, having the data to do the deal orchestration is key. And when you talk about like giving a good experience for the customer, no customer likes to come in, or prospect likes to come in engaging with one person, and then they have to get brought in and brought up to speed later with another person. They want to, be co-sold and co-serviced, because then it feels like a solution.
Yeah. Well, I know your background is in building materials and that whole side of the world. Maybe give an example of where this really works well, because I think you and I talked before about the home improvement situation where it's all about partners, right? You can't really go and redo your house without looking at lots of different products, and how that particular sector has really figured out how to partner and co-sell.
They have, yeah. And the similarities, oddly enough, between the home improvement or construction industry and the technology and SaaS industry are pretty interesting to look at. When you look at the hyperscalers, which is what they're calling Microsoft and AWS and whatnot, those folks will have these GSIs and these SIs. So they're systems integrators, right? They take your main platform like AWS or Microsoft Azure, and they help you stitch it together with other independent software vendors that give you your more well-rounded technology stack. And so you've got kind of those three major players. You've got the hyperscaler or the platform. Then you've got the systems integrator, which is who makes it all come together. And then you have the ISV, the independent software vendor, that's the other tools that you want integrated into your stack. And in home improvement, you could almost look at like a Lowe's or a Home Depot as kind of your hyperscaler, right? They're your platform that you build around, and people trust them because of their warranties and guarantees and pricing and the relationship they've built. But then you look at all the vendors that sell all of their stuff. Let's say you're doing a kitchen remodel, your faucets and flooring and countertops and whatnot. Those are all independent software vendors. Those are all the vendors that are supplying all the pieces that make your whole solution come together. And then your contractors that are doing the work to put those products in are very much systems integrators. And so when you think about something that's real physical like that versus something that can be a little more abstract like tech and software, you really think about like, well, how am I going to get that slab of stone turned into beautiful countertops that are functional and look the way that I want? And they're really yin and yang, product and service. You can't do really one without the other. And so when you look at the next tier of who I think are going to be the next hyperscalers or kind of that next wave of companies coming up, like HubSpot or like Atlassian, and you look at their focus on partners and systems integrators and independent software vendors, you can look at their earnings calls, transcriptions, you can hear from their executives on LinkedIn. That is almost all they talk about is partner go-to-market and their ecosystem and their community that they're creating around it. Because who are you going to trust more? An ad coming from Facebook or LinkedIn or something being pushed from a brand, or your systems integrator who you already work with saying, hey, this is a great tool. We recommend them and we do the integration into your bigger platform. So it's really, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, I mean, all the issues we're having with cybersecurity and all the hacking and everything, I think they're almost doing a favor to the whole idea of partnerships, because I hear more and more people saying, I don't want to buy on Facebook or Instagram or whatever. I just don't know who I can trust anymore. And so, like you said, this trusted brand, it's not just trust that the warranty will be there or trust that the product is a good product, but there's trust that I'm not in bed with a bad actor. You know, that's I think what a lot of people are fearful of as well.
I agree. I've heard this quote a couple times, but there was a big saying in the Valley that was data is the new oil. And now I'm hearing trust is the new data, a la trust is the new oil. And that says a lot, especially when you think about the saturation of these categories now. You think about the MarTech 15,000, and that's from Scott Brinker, who leads ecosystem over at HubSpot. And Scott, sorry if I got that number wrong, but it's somewhere around 15,000 vendors. So you can have a lot of good actors and a lot of bad actors in there. You have a lot of mediocre actors in there. And so everyone puts out content. Everyone looks at G2. So how do you decision? And what folks are doing is they're going into dark social, which is their network. It's text messaging. It's their DMs on LinkedIn. They're going to their partner ecosystem. They're going to their communities, those that they trust, and asking for feedback and insight and advice. So you'll hear the famous Jill Rowley say, we've gone from the how economy, meaning like, how do I build this stack, to the who economy, which is who can I trust to broker that insight or that knowledge to a best path forward to, whatever the business value is I'm looking for.
Right. Well, and I that brings me to LinkedIn, because in a way, LinkedIn is kind of your trusted community. And you and I have talked a lot about community building and how you incorporate community building into your sales process. And maybe talk a little bit about if we could take a little bit of a right turn. How would you advise companies that either have no sales organization or are building a sales organization? How can you use LinkedIn and community building to get yourself to that next level?
Yeah. Just start is usually the first advice. It's hard. It's hard to put yourself out there. I struggle with it. It sometimes feels awkward. And be authentic. For a long time, I would try to put out content that it was like, I think this is what people want, versus like, hey, this is who I am. This is what I believe in. And you'll find that being authentic is way easier, like lessons learned in kindergarten, right? Like, just be yourself, tell the truth. and like you'll attract those friends, you'll attract those people that are like you. And so yeah, like just do it, commit to it. I could take my own advice there and do more of it. But then the other piece is just be authentic, show up, and find people that you feel like you genuinely have something in common with. I remember there was a point in my LinkedIn kind of, strategy where I was just like, get any connection I could. It was like connections at all cost.
Mm-hmm.
And that's not effective. You end up just getting spammed all the time. When you do put out a post or content, you don't get the reaction or response that you want because you filled with quantity over quality. So.
Yeah, I remember one time somebody came to me and said, I see that you're connected to so-and-so on LinkedIn. And I thought, I have no idea who that person is. And that was the day I thought, I need to stop. It's not about the numbers. It's about, do I know every single person on my LinkedIn world? And would I be willing to introduce people to that person? And so
yep.
That made it, and I, I'm one of these people, I want to be everyone's friend, but whenever I get, hey, I'd like to connect with you, and I think, I don't know who you are, I generally don't do it anymore. But you struggle with that because you're thinking, well, but if I just accept everybody and I send out a blast that says, hey, our new product has launched, don't you want to reach as many people as possible? So how do you kind of reconcile being authentic and knowing everybody versus this is a great way to reach 3,000 or 4,000 people with an announcement that they might see?
Yeah, that's a good point. And so I would think in two kind of distinct lenses. One is your brand lens, right? And the brand's presence. Hey, on the brand side, come one, come all. Right? Like anybody that wants to connect with them and get that reach that you're looking for. But on the personal side, treat it like, if you're in something like Vistage or if you're in any other like groups, like people that you genuinely have something in common with that find interesting, that you get something valuable from their content and vice versa. And also there's a big difference now with kind of the tools in LinkedIn. So there's connecting versus following. There's a lot of people that I don't connect with, but I follow them because I want to subscribe to their content.
Yeah.
So yeah, just think about them differently. The brand versus you as a person.
Yeah. But I think it comes back and the question, why did I ask you about that, is it comes back to trust and making sure that your brand has trust. I've been working for a long time, and I've seen companies' reputations get ruined so quickly, and sometimes you just can't come back from that. And so I think people are in the same way. So you do want to be careful what you're posting on LinkedIn. I always tell people, LinkedIn is where my business colleagues are. And then Instagram is for a very small amount of people in my personal world. And then Facebook is for like all my high school friends. So that's how I kind of compartmentalize them all. My kids won't even get on Facebook anymore. But yeah, it's interesting to kind of really think about curating LinkedIn. And I do think sometimes I'll see a message from someone really deeply personal on LinkedIn. And I always look, and they get hundreds of whatever likes or whatever. Versus when those people post, hey, I'm speaking at so-and-so organization, they'll get 20 likes. So I do think when you are able and comfortable to share something, it really helps develop that. And I do think too, and I know you've posted some of these personal things that are important to you in your personal life. I think people just develop a different relationship with you.
They do. Yeah. We're human, right? Like we deal with struggles, and when people see you dealing with something that, even if it's something they don't identify with or they do identify with, it makes you human, and then they see your resolve and resilience and how you work through that and come out the other side, however you come out of it. And that's actually, it's a good point, Corrine, and I would add that to my response earlier in that authenticity is the vulnerability in that authenticity. Businesses, I don't know about you, but business feels harder than it's ever been right now.
Mhm.
And add on that, you're in an early stage company, or you're an executive, or you're a founder, or you're a CEO. It can be lonely. And so, like, I look to these people that I've built relationships on LinkedIn with, and I regularly have conversations with guys that are other founders, and we just like, it's almost like a therapy session.
It is.
Um,
Yeah.
we joke about it. Like, I've got a standing meeting with a CEO who has similar size company to mine in the Partech space, and we joke that our standing meeting has turned into almost like a men's group.
Mhm.
Um, so we're human, and when you go through these hard things, and you share the hard things that you're going through, it lets people know that you're a real person, you're dealing with real things, and if they're going through that real thing, talk about building a bond with someone. The best way to build a relationship is when they feel like they're looking in the mirror when they hear your story.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been planning to do this for a while, but that's to put a webinar series together about trauma in the workplace. And anyone who knows me well knows I talk about we don't think that we can have trauma in the workplace. We think trauma is only for our personal lives, and work is work, and therefore whatever happens is it's business, and it's not. And I work with a lot of startup CEOs who have gone through some really difficult things, and this is not just related to women or just related to men. I mean, I think it's a lot of people. So let's talk a little bit about your journey as a startup CEO. You've started a number of businesses, and I think they've all done very well. But talk to us a little bit about maybe some of your own personal secrets that you'd be willing to share. Like, what are some things, either early stage or later stage, that you say, "Wow, this is what I always make sure I do"?
I want to riff on what you were just talking about with trauma, and I think it's a good setup for a transition. Those in my network have heard me tell the story before, but my dad was an entrepreneur. He was the first person in our family to go to get a degree, got an electrical engineering degree at Purdue, and went on to be an entrepreneur in the industrial automation space and in the technology space. And we were launching GSM technology for, at the time, was VoiceStream. This was before T-Mobile and Deutsche Telekom came, and we were rolling out the GSM network around the country. And I had helped my dad get it going and open, and I had gone on to my next stage of my career, and he was still running that business. And he had one of his longtime customers come in to buy another corporate line for their company, and he finishes the phone, does the checkout. The guy goes out to his car and sits in his car for a while, and then he gets back out of his car and comes back in. My dad's like, he must have left his keys or forgot something. So my dad's looking around. The guy comes in, and he said, "Hey, I just got a call from Sprint on this phone that you just sold me, and they said if I brought the phone back in, they would mail me one for free, and it would be at my office tomorrow. So can I just bring this back?" That was traumatic for my dad. And then for me to hear that, I get why. Look, I get business, and I get channel disruption, and I get how there's bogeys that we're chasing, and there's trade-offs that we make to hit those bogeys. But it taught me a really good lesson about partnerships. And the more that I've unpacked my story and where I come from and why I'm so passionate about this space and Partner GTM is I believe in true partnerships, there should be equity. And this is a kind of a new space that people are talking about. What does equity mean when it's partner go to market? I believe it's access to the conversation, access to the customer, access to the data, but also transparency into what's happening. And I use that story as an example that obviously is seared in my mind when I go into business, as things that I wouldn't do. And look, I went on and I worked at Fortune 500 companies, and I saw different decisions that were made that were in that similar vein. But it's really kind of shaped who I am, and frankly, fighting for the little guy, and the entrepreneur, because people don't realize they think about these big brands, and these are people that, they're pick any Fortune 10, Fortune 20 company out there that has, is well respected. If you go talk to their vendors and partners, they will give you a very different perspective on that business than what you see in the earnings report, in the papers, and in the media. And I'm not saying that's wrong, right? Like, some things are behind closed doors. But I think as you're going to see what we're talking about play out with partners and trust and the brokering of trust through ecosystems, I mean this as seriously as I can. I think when the lights come on, the cockroaches will run. I believe that we are going to go through a real big kind of corporate awakening, corporate responsibility, corporate transformation. And I'm already seeing it in some places. But all of our businesses have been kind of built in that vein. So quote is visual CPQ and visual commerce for the home improvement industry. And so that allows a manufacturer like American Standard or Caesarstone to use one of our pieces of technology called an OmniFrame that embeds anywhere in their partner ecosystem. So their distributors, their big box retailers, their kitchen and bath, providers and dealers, and the end installers. And they can merchandise their websites as good as American Standard can by using this OmniFrame. It just adds plug and play right into their website. Almost think about it as like a pre-built Wix that just plug and play right into their tool. So it allows that small guy to deliver a merchandising experience that, an American Standard or a big company like that spends a lot of money on. So really allowing all the partners to have equal access to the technology to sell the product. And then with PingPilot, it's unified engagement or unified communications for partner ecosystems. And so when I talk about a kitchen and bath dealer using quotes OmniFrame on their website, and a customer is visualizing a new shower system, and has a customer has a question, PingPilot's engagement layer would be built into that OmniFrame. And if a text message or a chat or a call came in, and maybe the kitchen and bath dealer didn't have capacity at the time to answer in real time, the manufacturer can back them up, or the distributor can back them up in a multi-tenant way that allows the channel to flex into each other's kind of functional capacity. And it allows them to have a unified selling front. So you think about trust, we're really surrounding the customer and saying, we're going to solution around the customer because that's the right thing to do. But the good news is that's going to pull through a sale for everybody. And that pull through is what everyone wants. And when I look at two-step distribution, I spent 5 years at Emerson Electric working on new business model development, mainly in the utility space. And two-step distribution is kind of messy. Usually the manufacturer gets kind of cut out from the end customer, and they often don't know who's buying their product, what behavior is happening right now, who's selling well, who's not selling well, because all they see is the distributor's sales. And so there's a big data play here for these two-step manufacturers, in that now through this OmniFrame and through this multi-tenant co-selling and co-servicing layer, I now have data coming in, behavioral and transactional, that tells me, hey, dealer A has a fantastic lead to quote cycle, but dealer B has a struggling quote to cash cycle. Now I know where to deploy my field resources. I can send those field resources in where we can bolster that lead to quote, need or segment of the funnel, or quote to cash. So again, like when it goes back to a more equitable partner go-to-market structure. And I believe ParTech and technology in the ParTech space is the answer to it. And we're really bullish on it. And now when I look at ParTech right now, gosh, I want to say there's 150 to 200 vendors total right now, give or take. And so it's like MarTech was 15 years ago. So I think you're going to see the same push. What happened in MarTech with inbound and outbound, I think you're going to see the same thing happen in ParTech, and in a term that some of you may have heard of. The industry is trying to brand it as nearbound. And nearbound is kind of that circle of trust, those that are near to you. Those are that are your LinkedIn connections. Those are the people in your phone book. Those are the people that, if I did go to you and I asked you for a connection to someone in your network, and that was a warm connection, you would make it. And yeah, I believe ParTech's going to be the ParTech 10,000 in the next 10 to 15 years.
So how do you balance that with, I was talking to a really large company the other day, and they said, we now have a policy that if we're going to recommend another vendor to do whatever, something we don't do, we always have to give 3 names. That's our new corporate policy. And so we're so glad to meet you, because then you could be one of our 3 names. And I'm thinking, so am I just checking a box, or, you know, how will I be recommended? And I've seen that through my entire career, where people are afraid to say, you know who you should use, you know who's really good is so-and-so. So they kind of say, well, here's 3 names, and, you know, I'm not going to get involved in which one you pick, because then you can't come back to me later and say, oh, these people weren't very good. So where do you see that happening in terms of partner networks? Because I can tell you, some of the partner networks I've set up in the past, and Paul, you know, my business partner, and I did this in our previous work. We just kind of said, hey, everybody who wants to be a partner can be a partner. And so you could have a nice long list of all these different people doing things. So like back in your, you know, the home rebuilding situation, you know, do you just put every faucet manufacturer on the list and say, pick whatever faucet you want? Or do you say, look, these are the really good faucets that you should look at?
Yeah, that's a good question. And that's where, you know, maybe the analogy between tech and home improvement gets a little more of a stretch, in that software is often so hard to evaluate, right? It's like a faucet. It's like, hey, I like how it looks. It's got a great warranty, and, you know, the reviews are pretty easy to understand. But with a lot of software, it's complicated. And so I go back to just authenticity. Is like, organically, you'll develop relationships with partners that you truly add value to each other, whether it's a services partner doing systems integration, or it's an independent software vendor that is complementary to your product, or, you know, maybe it's a platform that you integrate with, like Microsoft or Slack or whoever. And I have found you can't fake it. Like, you can't really force it. Those relationships build organically over time, and those end up becoming the folks that you refer, because the value's there, because the track record's there. I know that that's like a really boring answer, but it's yeah, like your community will tell you. For example, Slack. Our community kept telling us, like, hey, our pane of glass for communications is Slack. Can't we just have all of our pings coming from our partner ecosystem come right into Slack? And so we built an MVP Slack integration that wasn't public, didn't go through the whole approval process, and went and gave it to folks, and they were like, yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. But it says, hey, this app isn't approved by Slack. That's okay. We're okay with that, because it delivers the value that we want. And so it's like, all of a sudden, they're getting IT departments to make exceptions for approved apps from Slack, because there's value there. And in the next week, we should have our new Slack app approved and out in the marketplace, and then we can go promote that partnership. So yeah, I organically, your community will tell you, and then once you have that relationship, with Atlassian, for example, the same thing happened with Atlassian. Folks said they wanted the communications to come into Atlassian and Jira, because they wanted to be able to create service tickets off the conversations and transcribe the text messages and voice calls and whatever, and raise a ticket. And so all of a sudden, then there's like, wow, we have 300 installs in the Atlassian marketplace. And then we get an inbound phone call from Atlassian saying, hey, we're really interested in what you guys are doing. We're hearing about it. We're getting Zendesk customers that are saying that they want to move over to Jira, but they need a better engagement layer. And the community has said that you've been a solution. What do you think about engineering a new app together. And so we worked with their architects and engineers to spec a really deeply native integration, much more native than our original one. And that's going to launch here, probably a sprint or two out. And that'll turn into a joint go-to-market motion, where now, I can hitch my wagon to Atlassian but I would have never got there had we not put in the time and the effort with the community and building the features. And it was just, time and pressure. Eventually it bubbled up and
And listening too. I mean, it drives me crazy when people tell me, I want your 2-year product roadmap. I'm like, you got a 2-year product roadmap. You're not listening. You're not listening to where things are going. So, we're going to wrap up here, but I'm going to ask you two hopefully short questions. One, as a CEO of a fast growing startup, I know this is going to be like asking you what your favorite child is, but what's the most important metric for you that you look at in your business?
That is a hard one. So both of these companies right now are pretty early stage. We're about 2 million in ARR. So yeah, I look at CAC and I look at churn. Net revenue retention is really far up there. But honestly, where I'm at is a little more subjective. Like just those opportunities happening like Atlassian that we just talked about, or there's another couple announcements we'll be making soon. Those are more validating than any net recurring revenue or any dollar metric. The validation of product market fit doesn't always come in a neat, dashboard.
Number.
Yeah. And a number. Yeah. And so, those are the things that I get excited about.
When people always say, how is your business going? I just can't cut to a number. I always have to get to a story. And I'm like, let me tell you a story. Funny story. I was in a restaurant yesterday with someone having one meeting. I literally said the name of the company that they should meet. And I got up to leave, and the person at the next table stands up. Not only do I know them, but they're from that company that they needed to meet. And I was like, we could have just done it right here and introduced you. But those are the stories that I find more interesting than, what's your CAC. But it's important to know those things.
It is. And when we get bigger, it will be more important. And I talk about it more, but we're just really early stage. So.
All right. So last question I'll ask. We've got a lot of entrepreneurs listening today, startup CEOs and founders. What's one quick lesson or thought that you would share with them as we close out today?
Partner up.
Yep. Figure it out, right? Figure out who those people are. Yeah.
And I would say who your buyer trusts. Find who your buyer trusts.
Yeah.
And go find ways to build bridges with them.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. And I would say devote a portion of your time on partnerships, whatever that is, alliances, whatever it looks like. You've got to spend some time on it. Well, Tom, this has been great. We're going to put up a slide in a moment showing folks how they can get a hold of you. There's going to be a nice QR code. So get your camera ready and take a photo of the QR code. But before we finish, I just want to mention we're excited about our April Inside Track. We're actually going to have a social media influencer on talking about how influencing is impacting and changing and growing businesses. I get so many questions on this because I happen to know this influencer well, and people are always trying to understand how we have changed to an influencer marketplace. So that'll be on April 16th. And then on May 14th, we're going to have David Chun, who's CEO of Equilar, on. Some of you may know David, and he's going to be talking about what's happening in the executive compensation area. And again, as a very successful entrepreneur and someone who's very involved in the startup community and the board community, we're going to be talking about that. So those are the next two coming up. And I'm hoping this summer we'll be able to have a great inside track about cybersecurity and everything that's happening there, because boy, a lot going on there. So again, thanks so much, Tom, for joining us. And on behalf of everyone at Compass Equity, appreciate everybody's time and attention. And if we can help in any way, help your company grow, please reach out. And otherwise, I hope everyone has a great day. Thanks.